Howdy folks, welcome back to Grumpy Viking Tactical Channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today I'm just kind of up here at camp. I'm actually recording this before the 4th of July, but I'm supposed to be on vacation. Shh, don't tell my wife. I'm supposed to be on vacation, and but I still brought the camera equipment anyway and thought I'd do some recording because there's some kind of things I want to discuss, and today's discussion is going to be, well, more or less Civil War II electric boogaloo. Who would win? And this isn't going to be the same as the standard who would win videos, because I'm going to be straight out and honest with you folks. There's a lot of things that people are really missing when it comes to who would win. You know, I've seen quite a few people skip over the logistics, or they would highlight the logistics and not really say much about it. Excuse me while I get a drink. It's hot and humid out here today, and I've been actually out here in the woods scouting game trails up here, hunt coyote. But alright, a couple things I want to discuss, and the main thing is who would win. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, the left would win because Joe Biden's president and the military is going to do whatever the president says. Well, I hate to break it to you, sunshine. No, the military is not going to do whatever the president says. The FBI is not going to do whatever the president says. The ATF, the DEA, well, the ATF might. The DEA, regular law enforcement, local LEOs, they're not going to do what the president says. Because at the end of the day, if the difference is between morals and a paycheck, military service personnel has families too. They have brothers, they have sisters, they have fathers and mothers, wives, sons and daughters. And at the end of the day, when they're given the order to shoot on civilian populace, they're not going to follow those orders. Most of them won't. At least that's what I want to believe. Because people have morals. And when it comes to following orders for a paycheck and throwing out your morals, or keeping your morals and shooting on your own populace, including the possibility of shooting on your own family, I think morals is going to win. Not every time, most of the time. Some people have stronger moral character than others. I've seen people highlight the logistics. Well, the Midwest is mostly Republican, so the Republicans will win because that's where all the farmland is. Yeah, that's a pretty good argument. Except for the thing is those other left-leaning states that I would imagine would go one way or the other, they got farmland too. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily foolproof, besides the fact that if you look at the East Coast, especially the northeast coast, you know, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the tri-state area, and if you look at California and Washington, where some of the biggest ports are, they're not going to have too many issues getting stuff shipped into the country, especially if they have to rely on the foreign aid. And I'm not going to say the government's going to go one way or the other. I don't know how the government's going to go. Really don't care how the government's going to go because, well, the government can go piss up a rope for what I care. The main thing I want to talk about, though, with this whole who would win scenario, I don't want to really talk about men and equipment and logistics, because that's what everybody else is talking about, especially the equipment and the men thing, because, you know, talking about guns is sexy. Now, a lot of them are skipping out on logistics, or they skim over the logistics because, well, talking about crates of food, barrels of fuel, ammunition, gun parts is not sexy. Rations, so on and so forth. But here's what I want to make the argument of. Civil War II, electric boogaloo, who would win? And while I can sit back and I can look at the whole aspects of the shooting war and how the war would be fought and how different areas would divide, I can pretty much look at it and come up with my own conclusion of who would win. But at the end of the day, who really wins? Well, I'm going to argue nobody. Let me tell you why. So when you go back and you look at the first Civil War and you look how the first Civil War ended, there was a lot of units, a lot of Confederate units, even though the Confederacy did give their unconditional surrender, actually did not surrender. Some of them would proceed to do their own little guerrilla warfare, essentially becoming outlaws. And then of course you'd still have a lot of people that kept saying, oh, the South will rise again. Even to this day there's still people that says the South will rise again. I don't know if that's good or bad. Sometimes I think that'd be good, but that's neither here nor there. Of course, then also with that being said, with the Civil War, you had a lot of military equipment, cannons, Gatling guns, rifles, particularly Sharps and Henry rifles, revolvers, so on and so forth, that were getting dumped onto the civilian market because both sides were getting weapons left and right. And while the Confederacy was getting a lot of weapons from the British, the British, for the third time, sticking their nose in American business. Either way, is moving on. You'd still have the Union, and up north here, our big thing was production. We were already in the processes of coming up with assembly lines and automated production and things of that nature. Of course, that wouldn't get really refined until Henry Ford. But that being said, the production, essentially in the South, in the Confederacy, farming was the big deal. However, here in the North, factories and production was the big deal. And of course, at the end of the day, that would win out because, well, we had more men, we had more equipment, we had the better logistics. Now, I can't argue the Confederacy had better fighters, better generals, considering how often they would win battles when outnumbered. And there were definitely some poor tacticians within the Union. And a lot of people got killed. And that's the other part of why I don't think anybody's going to win. Because realistically, the people that do need shot are not the ones that are going to get shot. They're going to be people like you and me. They're going to be our sons. They're going to be our daughters, at least the ones that are going to be of age at that time. And that's the problem. The middle class and the poor are going to be the ones fighting the war, not the ones that deserve it. Not the news media who keeps throwing out all kinds of BS, keeps lying to people, brainwashing people. Not the government who got us into this really bad situation in the first place, who cares more about their pockets and their corruption than they do about the American people. So it's going to come down to if there's a Civil War II electric boogaloo, and I'm going to say if, it's going to be fought by normal everyday folk. Now, of course, unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe unfortunately, I don't know how I want to look at it right now. I don't think it's going to be fought by me, because unfortunately, I've reached a point in my life where I have a bad back, 2 bad knees, and I'm overweight. And I'm trying to fix the overweight problem, but at the end of the day, I still have a bad back and 2 bad knees. That ain't going to do any good. And I ain't as fucking quick as I used to be either. That's for sure. Still a good shot, though. But that's all going to be until the eyes give out, right? And that's the kind of problem with time and age. Either ways, the next thing that would happen due to the Civil War was an increased amount of outlaws. Also an increased amount of bounty hunters. There was a lot of Western stories, even movies made on this whole idea. Bands of outlaws, maybe 10 or 15 guys grouped together, robbing banks, trains, etc., whatever they could rob from horseback. And they were all Civil War buddies that were part of the Confederacy. So there'll definitely be an increase in outlaws, and there'll be lawlessness. The next problem is too, is if I sit back and look at who I think will win the shooting war, we'll just say who's going to win the shooting war. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to pay for the different things that have happened over the last probably 20 years or so, maybe longer, especially when you look at the certain crime families inside the government. And realistically, don't mind my long pauses here, I need a drink. Realistically, I think what's going to happen is you're going to get a bit of an overcorrection. People are going to get shot and hanged as traitors who really weren't traitors. Farms are going to get burned down to the ground. Houses will be burned down to the ground. Families who support one side or the other will be dragged out in the street and executed. That'll be during the war. Even after the war, that will continue. Seeing the country tore apart in half. Hell of a thing to think about, ain't it? And as time goes on, more and more people think about it. You know, it's definitely one of those things. People acknowledge what's going on, what's happening. And some people can tell that there is something coming. So for everybody who thinks the government's doing such a bang-up job, you better get your head out of the sand, because, nah. Anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up this rambling at that. That's pretty much all this was just some rambling. Trying to get some thoughts out there. Think freely. Stuff of that nature. Anyway, folks, hopefully y'all enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon. That does help me out. Helps me out do content and things of that nature. Kind of gives the channel a bit of a budget. Also, if you enjoyed the video, got a lot of other content that's gun gear survival related. But anyway, folks, I think I'm going to wrap it all up at that. Once again, thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.